Are you somebody that goes to the gym and just blasts weights until you can't anymore? Are you somebody that does endless drop sets and supersets and just goes, how many reps are you gonna do until I can't anymore, right? Or are you somebody who just pyramids up until failure and then coming back down, having your spotter lift the rest of the way for you? And are you doing all this because your favorite bodybuilder or that random big guy at the gym told you, you gotta take it to failure and beyond to activate all the muscles? Well, you're gonna wanna watch this video. What's good, YouTube? It's your boy John Mango, and I'm back again representing Beyond the Iron. Let's go. You know what? I'm putting the hood up for this one. I drop weekly fitness content on this channel to help you get to your goals faster and more enjoyably, so if you're interested in doing so, consider subscribing. I'm going to be dropping some recommendations at the end of this video as to how and when you should be going to failure, but first, we got to talk about some truths behind it. And before I begin with that, I do have my notes here because it's some important points to touch on, and I do get all of these points, or at least most of them, from research that I'm going to be citing at the bottom of the description below. A lot of this comes from Mass, which is something that I recently subscribed to because it comes from three of my mentors in the fitness industry: Eric Helms, Greg Knuckles, and Michael Zordo. Alright, so first we're going to discuss taking it to failure when it comes to strength and performance in the gym. Now, beyond just logically knowing this, the research has shown that when you take your first or really any set to failure, meaning mechanical failure, you can't do another rep with proper form. Absolute failure is when you can't do another rep even with improper form and you got buddy spotting you on the lift. But we're talking even just mechanical failure. When your body can't properly lift that weight anymore, the subsequent sets are going to deteriorate in terms of power and velocity output. And as a result, your overall performance for that workout will degrade. Another important finding is that even though there was a similar training volume across the two groups, one going to failure and one not reaching failure, it was actually found that the group that reached failure actually had a perceived higher output than the people that didn't. So that essentially means that you feel like, or you actually are, working harder than you need to be. Seems like a no-brainer there. However, that very thing is what leads people to thinking that they're getting a good workout, is that if you don't feel like you've given it everything you've got in the sense of actual muscle failure, then you feel like you haven't really done anything at all, and that's just simply a misconception according to the science. Now, another important note, taking it to failure, across the two groups that I'm mentioning in this recent study, it was shown that recovery was actually impaired on the bench press, because that's one of the lifts that was specified here, for up to 48 hours, whereas the other group wasn't nearly as long. So it's going to impair your recovery because of its detriment on the nervous system as a whole. So from these findings, we can actually conclude that training to failure, especially often, will lead to less performance improvement when it comes to strength gains. So for any strength athletes or people that are really prioritizing strength gain, you should be staying away from reaching failure on your main compound lifts for the majority of your training, unless of course it's competition time, because if you don't, you're just holding yourself back. Those people that go in the gym and do those 1RMs every single time they go in, yeah, you're wasting your time. Stop doing that. Be smarter about it. Also, of course, it's worth noting that chance of injury is much greater when you're reaching failure, because again, when reaching mechanical failure, your body is now lifting the load in a very inefficient and potentially dangerous way. Alright, I'm just gonna take the hood off. Alright, now let's talk about going to failure when it pertains to hypertrophy, which means muscle gain. Now, it's important to note, when it pertains to muscle gain, the jury is out, as they would say, because there hasn't actually been long enough conducted studies to be able to provide us with conclusive across the board evidence that going to failure actually impedes or holds you back in terms of your muscle gain. So we're simply still waiting on longer term studies to occur to solidify whether or not it actually has a negative impact on muscle gain when it comes to a scientific standpoint. But that said, there are some previous applications from what I just mentioned that could lead us to understanding that reaching failure is still not in your best interest, regardless of of whether or not it leads to maybe slightly better or the same hypertrophy result. So if you could perform similar or even more volume with less perceived effort because you're not reaching failure, then that does three things for you. One, it increases your strength faster, as we just described and explained. Two is you're actually going to recover better. And three, it minimizes your chance of injury. Now, those three things combined, and again, this is not fact, rather a speculation that I've made myself based mostly on the logic that seems to be presented from this, but it seems as though those three things combined will ultimately lead to more hypertrophy down the line. And what I mean by that is, even if you see more hypertrophy in 2 years, that increased risk of injury alone, less recovery, the combination of these things could lead to you actually getting injured to a point where in 3 years, when you're injured and you're out for 1 year, you're obviously not making any gains, or if anything, losing gains, whereas the person who saw less hypertrophy in the short term sees more over time from being able to actually stay in the gym longer. So the question is now, should you ever go to failure, or what's even the point of going to failure then? Even if you don't compete, it's obviously okay to go to failure at times. Again, there's a lot of people that do it on the regular, but if you want to do it properly, I'll give you an example. Myself, I've actually reached failure in certain massive compound lifts maybe once over a 3-year period, the last 3 years, and I did it on the deadlift, and it was great, it was fine. Now the key there is that once you're not going to failure for a long period of time, you're able to safely and better ingrain the right motor pattern and the right habit of executing an exercise correctly over time. So for example, if I'm always working in the mid 400s with my deadlift, I'm able to properly handle that load. So it allows me to create the right habit of doing so in a way that I'm not going to get injured. So that way, when I finally decide to test my 1 rep max, the chances of injury are just so much lower than they would be otherwise, because my recovery is better, my motor pattern is better, and my body simply likely won't lift the weight if my form is that bad, because again, it just can't do it. Now keep in mind, that's talking about failure on massive compounds. My personal recommendation is you should be trying to avoid that as often as possible. Maybe once or twice a year is the best bet you've got on those, because massive ones like squat, deadlifts, and bench can be extremely dangerous, and they could take you out of the game right then and there. That said, reaching failure on isolation lifts doesn't pose nearly as much of a danger as it does on the compounds, and it's obviously okay to be going to failure on those a lot more often, as it's also less taxing on the nervous system. So, final recommendations, if you stayed into this point, comment below, give me some gains for everybody out there. I appreciate you watching. So recommendations here is very straightforward. What I would recommend is not reaching failure on massive compound free weight exercises more than once or twice a year, even less than that if you can hold yourself to it. Now with that said, reaching failure on isolation exercises isn't that bad, but I wouldn't make a habit of doing it, because again, it will become taxing, it will increase fatigue faster and accumulate it over time. But of course, taking it to failure on the occasional bicep curl, tricep rope push down, and lateral raises are just such small exercises that they likely won't lead to you getting injured or really crossing over and impairing your performance on other days of the week. So another thing here is, why do you see everybody going to failure then? Why do people think that it's the right thing to do? Well, one of the reasons is because those who are uninformed and don't realize how to train just imagine that going as hard as possible is the only way to grow. Obviously, that's diminishing returns to a point, and eventually will just lead to a plateau when smart programming isn't involved and you've passed the beginner experience level. Now the next reason, and likely the more responsible of the two, is the fact that you've got these pro bodybuilders that came out in the magazines years ago saying how they always train past failure. Now it's important to note these people have superhuman levels of recovery and performance when it comes to the gym. They can take on a lot more volume, load, and intensity without as much risk of getting injured or impairing the recovery. And obviously that information got out to a bunch of people not on steroids, and ever since it's just been a blind leading the blind of people just passing down this information. Younger kids went in the gym, they saw their dad, their uncle, whoever lifting like that, or they still see these bodybuilders out there lifting like that. They don't bother to look at a study, a research, or a video like this one, and they just follow suit. And this is why most people get injured in the gym, plateau, don't see results, and just waste their time giving more effort than is even required. So track your workouts, implement some smart programming, avoid failure more, and you won't even need a spotter ever again for any of your lifts. Not only that, but you'll be damaging your body so much less, giving yourself more longevity and more gains in the long term. Trust me, it'll feel a lot more liberating. Anyways everyone, thanks for watching this video. If you enjoyed the longer form videos like this one, leave a comment below, or if you like the shorter ones like I posted recently, let me know that as well so I know what to bring you going forward. If you enjoyed the video, give it a thumbs up, comment below, share with your friends, and subscribe because I'm going to see you in next week's videos. Thanks again everyone. I'll catch you in the next one. I'm out.